All right, well, welcome to episode 11 of our Ask Us Anything series. We are having some video problems today through this platform, so we're just going to do this audio only. I am Mark Graban, VP of Improvement and Innovation Services from KaiNexus.
And I'm Greg Jacobson, the CEO and co-founder of KaiNexus.
So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Happy Valentine's Day. It is February 14th for anybody who has lost track of that and needs to panic. You still have some time left in the day to recover from that. But we're going to start off, in the mode of Ask Us Anything. We get all kinds of questions. One question here, we've done a lot of these together, these broadcasts, and Greg and I have worked together for a while now. How did you guys meet? I'll tell the first part of the story because Facebook reminded me today. February 14th, 2011, my wife and I were in Austin, Texas to see Willie Nelson perform a concert, which is what brought me down to Austin. And since I was there, I had gotten an email from a reader of my blog who said, hey, I think you and this guy, Dr. Greg Jacobson, would have a lot to talk about. You should connect. And so while I was there in Austin, it was an opportunity to meet up. Greg, do you want to kind of tell the next part of the story?
Yeah, I remember the day quite well. I actually had a shift that day or that night starting, so we met up on South Congress. If you haven't been to Austin, there's a really cool place that has a great vibe called South Congress. Has a really neat pizza joint called Home Slice. We sat down. Really, I think to have, maybe a 30-minute, 45-minute conversation, just kind of get to know each other. About 3.5 hours later, we had realized that we were really aligned in kind of what our missions were and what our thoughts were about continuous improvement. And Mark was very intrigued with the hypothesis that technology could actually help spread continuous improvement and thought we were coming at it from a really interesting vantage point. So that marked 6 years ago today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was I think a conversation I was willing to have because the guy who connected us said, hey, Greg's done a lot of work with continuous improvement. Always interested in meeting a doctor who is doing that and trying to spread that in organizations. I had never heard of the idea of continuous improvement software, so I was intrigued. But I'll have to say I went in with and I think Greg sensed it, a fair amount of skepticism, but Greg's passion for continuous improvement sort of won me over, at least to the idea of taking a closer look at KaiNexus.
I think at least one of the questions kind of directly relates to, perhaps a shift in the thought process of how continuous improvement can get done in the 21st century. So I'm looking forward to going through these questions.
Yeah, so that first question is from Rudy, who asked, are there inventive methods to improve senior management visibility and support for continuous improvement? Software, I think, obviously is one of those. I'll have Greg touch on that, but let me say first, I think this is a really important challenge. I meet with organizations, and I'll often hear people say, our senior leaders support lean, or they support continuous improvement. I always have to kind of probe a little bit and say, well, what do they mean by support? A successful culture of continuous improvement requires more than just a one-off statement of support for the concept of improvement. It requires that leaders get involved in different ways. Part of the traditional advice would be, to go to the Gimba, get out of the executive suite, go and meet with people on the front lines and see what they're struggling with, listen to them about their ideas, their opportunities for improvement, and not to give people answers, but to be a servant leader, to be supportive, to be encouraging in different ways. So there are leadership behaviors that are pretty consistent. And Greg, why don't you kind of take it from there?
Yeah, I think I'm going to take a little kind of different approach on this. Obviously, KaiNexus as a software platform, Mark hinted at that I would talk about that, I think is a great way to bring in senior leaders by creating a dashboard for them, giving them their key KPIs that they want to peek at, and then giving visibility into all the improvement work. But kind of talked about an inventive method, and so let me touch on that. Jim Collins, I think it's in his book Good to Great, talked about a BHAG, and we talked about my haircut, and so I think a BHAG was just a really great way for us here at KaiNexus to kind of get me emotionally involved in what we were trying to accomplish this year. So BHAG stands for a big, hairy, audacious goal, and it's not supposed to be a goal that's kind of financially driven or kind of, it certainly should be objective, but it shouldn't be stale. It shouldn't be boring, if you will. And but it should be something that if the organization achieves it, it really has moved the needle forward and indicates that the organization has accomplished something in the year. And so I'll quickly tell about our BHAG and the haircut and why I was actually quite disappointed to find out that GoToMeeting decided to play a little trick on us by not making the webcam work. But our BHAG for 2016 at KaiNexus was to have over 25,000 improvements completed in the system by the end of the year. Now, to give context of what that means, at the beginning of 2016, we had just over 12,000 improvements in the system. So from about 2011, with our very first release of the software, to December 31st, 2015, there was just over 12,000. And so I challenged our company really to challenge our customers to see if we could actually double that in 1 year. And lo and behold, we did do that. We got just over, or all of us got just over 26,000. At the beginning of the year, I turned to our VP of Sales, Jeff Russell, and I said, hey, if we hit this, I'm going to let the company shave my head. And it really kind of play along with the big hairy part of that. And so we'll have a blog post certainly shortly coming out where we'll show the actual event of the entire team getting their turn to put the razor, if you will, to my head.
Yeah.
I think a BHAG is a great idea to get senior leadership involved. Not that they have to commit to shaving their head, maybe a small tattoo or something like that, but.
Yeah, and since we ended up doing just a PowerPoint slide here instead of live video, I'm sorry I didn't have a picture of Greg handy to throw up on screen, but we'll share that on our blog soon. But let's continue the discussion. There was another question here that asked, how can we sustain improvement activities and prevent slipping back to old habits, reverting to the old way? I mean, that's a story, a question I've been hearing in healthcare the whole 11 years, 12 years almost that I've worked in healthcare, whether, people are talking about rapid improvement events, even some of the world leaders in lean healthcare would report in articles and at conferences that they would have over 50% backsliding rates. And, from what I've seen from rapid improvement events and different types of improvement, what's often described as backsliding is actually, I think, more accurately described as a change that was never fully adopted. And I think, at the end of an improvement event, this is one of the weaknesses of the improvement event methodology, if there's not a good handoff, where, the event team says, oh, we've designed a new process, and we've tested it, and we say it's better, and now we're going to chuck it over the wall to the people who do the work every day. And that often just doesn't ever stick to begin with. And people don't understand the new process. They weren't involved in the development of it. They weren't trained in it. Kaizen event leaders come back 30 or 60 days later and they say, oh, people are doing things the old way. They must have backslid. When, if they had been there every single day, they might have noticed. Sometimes the root of the problem is the change never got adopted. So whether it's that or other circumstances, I think a key lesson is rather than blaming people for backsliding, we need to ask why the change either didn't get adopted or why it reverted to the old way, and then go from there. What do you think, Greg?
I think that it's a symptom of the failure of implementing the change versus kind of what happened after the quote change was implemented. And I put quotes around that because it's so true that improvement is really hard. Continuous improvement is hard work, right? I mean, if if this was easy to do, everyone would be doing it at a really high level. But staying disciplined and creating those habits, and leadership really continuing to make sure that the right things are being measured, that standardization is occurring and not kind of reverting back, is going to all be critical. But I think the single most important thing is going to be leading with why and then including everybody. If you lead with why and you include everybody in what you're doing, then I'll bet you can do everything else less well and you'll still backslide less.
Well, and this idea of include everybody, that actually leads into the next question, and we can talk about the definition of including everybody in the context of rapid improvement events or other improvement work. The question, and it's a fairly long question, but let's just go ahead and read most of it, from Margot. Says, I just took a 1-week lean training certification. One of the common themes that was always brought up was that quality improvement must be done with everyone from the team in the room, and this without exception. She continues, I've been doing successful improvement virtually, but was told that was not, quote unquote, lean. What are your views on this, especially with government cutbacks on travel and staffing? We simply don't have the resources. There were team members in the training and are now saying they must travel or they will not participate in an improvement team. Do you have any thoughts on virtual improvement teams? Because I thought our virtual teams were doing very well. So I think, my first thought is, I'll say this as a joke. Absolute statements are always wrong, or absolute statements are never always correct. Or, we twist ourselves around. I kind of cringe at absolute statements when people say things like never or always. Sometimes people within Lean will say, you always need to start with 5S. I'm like, well, I can think of situations where that always doesn't apply. So I think this idea that you always have to have everybody in the room, that might be ideal. Like when I worked in manufacturing, if we were doing significant Kaizen with the production line or production cell, we could plan and shut down the line for an hour and bring everybody together and work on something. We had inventory that could buffer us from that downtime. In healthcare, you can't do that. You still have, in most settings, you still have continually patients you have to treat. And so I think you have to be creative. And I've seen teams be very effective where you pull some people away from the work to work on something for an hour or for a week, but you're getting input from as many other people on the team as you can. So I think it comes back to the definition within this question of what does it mean to include everybody? You can get input, you can get feedback, you can have people be involved in different ways other than being 100% dedicated to the improvement. I think sometimes you can be and you have to be creative with different types of improvement. And Greg, I know you have a lot of thoughts and maybe even stories from your own experience or from our customers about getting people involved in different ways.
Absolutely. I couldn't disagree with that statement anymore. Number one, nothing I've ever read, nothing you and I, Mark, have ever talked about, nothing I've ever talked about, other lean leaders has ever said that you're not doing lean unless everyone is participating in person. I mean, you gave several examples of operations and systems that would actually not be very beneficial to stop, right? Healthcare, for example, perhaps you have night shift workers. Do you want to kind of disrupt their circadian rhythm? Perhaps that's going to create a worse outcome in the future. And in a world that we live in, number one, it being so connected in asynchronous ways, and then number two, the kind of organizations that we're talking about are really large, complex organizations that are often geographically distributed. And so to say that, well, it's completely impractical to bring everybody in the room at the same time. So then the natural conclusion is, well, we'll never improve because we can't bring everyone together. Well, there's no reason to improve. So I think kind of creating this artificial barrier is going to ultimately lead to interval improvement and not continuous improvement, and it's going to create a lot of excuses not to work. And then you know, my final comment on this is I would we have what, 52 customers, 53 customers right now that would almost be arguing that none of them are doing lean, and I would say that some of them are doing some of the best lean management systems that there are, and are connecting and collaborating in not only face-to-face, but in huddles, in asynchronous ways on KaiNexus. In any which way you can connect, you should connect, and you should be engaged, and you should be interactive. And we kind of just talked about the prior thing. There's no possible way you can do a Kaizen event with every single person in the organization that would ever touch that process at the table, right? So when I made the comment, include everybody, it wasn't, you know, the physical manifestation of that person is the only way they can be included. It's lots of different ways to connect people. So please do not take that kind of misconclusion into the future and give people what I would consider an excuse not to improve. This I could go on for longer, Mark, but I think you get it.
No, I think as with a lot of things with lean and with life in general, you know, Toyota people, former Toyota people I've worked with and learned from, are always talking about balance, in all things balance, and neither extreme is ideal. We don't want to take it to the other extreme and say we're going to let two people dictate all of the changes and new standardized work for this 50-person department. Well, that doesn't make sense. But you might not also, you might not have the opportunity for all 50 people to be fully involved in everything. So you get input. You have representatives from groups who take a first pass at an improvement and then check it and test it and get 5 minutes worth of input from each of the other people on the team. So I think you can include everybody, you can respect everybody, you can get input from everybody without them being fully dedicated to an improvement effort. I think the other idea of all things balance, in all things balance, is, you know, we have KaiNexus customers who do huddles, they do meetings, they're working face-to-face, but they also involve some people virtually, people who don't work that shift, people who aren't at that physical location. There are different ways to get the right level of input from different people without going to some sort of extreme, because it sounds like in Margot's case, people now are using that as a barrier, or they're upset or disgruntled that you're not going to let me travel, so therefore we're not going to be able to improve. That just doesn't seem ideal.
And two last points on this, Mark, not to beat it to death here.
That's right.
Number one, when and where is the best place to discover waste and to have ideas on improving things? In the Gimba, when you're actually doing the work, right? So why would you not want to immediately start your improvement cycle right then by capturing it and by starting that? So
Greg, you still there? We have lost Greg's audio apparently, so now we are 2 for 2 in different GoToWebinar problems. We have webcam problems, and now.
What about now? Is my audio coming through?
Nope. Now you are back, Greg.
And so the second point, aside from probably the best place to start the continuous improvement cycle, if you will, it being in the Gimba, is coaching and thinking about improvement happens in lots of different ways and different people. So it wouldn't be an appropriate webinar or me having a discussion about improvement work if I don't bring up the San Antonio Spurs. If you don't know, I'm a fanatical Spurs fan. You do now. And if you look at, I mean, I look at the Spurs as a system, right? Everyone talks about that as that they're a system, and so we could have a long conversation about kind of system and discipline and habits and how that increases potential of inherent, kind of skills and quality. But I want to talk a little bit though about how does the system get disseminated at the Spurs, and if you think about that, it's not Coach Popovich always talking, right? I mean, you see lots of small little interactions between kind of senior people on the team talking to junior people on the team. You have even seen examples where he'll have a timeout being led by one of the players. And so to kind of think of improvement as being in this very kind of rigid mindset of where physical people have to be and who's doing what kind of conversations, it's a much more fluid concept where, you know, even the most junior people can contribute, and all the way down the line, everyone is helping everybody coach. It's almost like a catchball of disseminating goodness, if you will. And so that 100% is going to happen in lots of tiny little interactions, and that's really when you start seeing a culture occur, when those types of things are happening.
Yeah, you mentioned the Spurs. Not to make you jealous, Greg, I'm going to get to see the Spurs play tomorrow night in Orlando.
Very
so
nice.
I will share.
Sorry, you're going to get to see the Spurs win in Orlando tomorrow.
Well, hey, let's not get ahead of things. They're going to play. I hope they win. But hey, before we get back into continuous improvement talk, I do want to mention that our next GoToWebinar, our next Ask Us Anything, is going to be on April 4th, I believe, which is the day after the NCAA men's basketball tournament championship game. So I'm going to ask, Greg, do you have a favorite NCAA basketball team, or are you just all focused on the Spurs?
I'm just focused on the Spurs.
All right. Well,
I'm mostly focused on the Spurs, aside from the fact that I'm from Austin and San Antonio, but I love the system aspect of it. I think it's what I love about Lean. And so that's where my love of sports kind of begins and ends. And I also have a deep love for squash, and we could talk about the parallels of squash and Lean as well in a different question or a different time. But
to me, squash is a vegetable, so if we're talking food, we can cover that. But no, I've blogged about Popovich and the Spurs and teamwork and leadership and the system. I've blogged about that a number of times. But I'm going to make a plug for my Northwestern Wildcats, not to jinx it, but we are hoping to actually make the tournament for the first time ever this year.
Wow.
We're the only major conference team to never make the tournament. So please root for us. We could be the Cinderella story this year. But again, I shouldn't have even brought it up.
Well, and for all of our international listeners, I want to first give a shout out to Prime Metals. I know I was about to start this, and one of the guys in the office was like, "Oh, I think there's gonna be a bunch of Prime Metals." So thank you for joining the KaiNexus tribe, and we're really looking forward to helping you guys improve. But the NCAA is the kind of premier college basketball tournament ending the season. So that's what we're talking about. If you have no idea. So.
Yeah. So let's go back to the continuous improvement questions. Maybe we can get a couple more here in the 7 minutes or so we've got left. What are, Omaka asked, what are effective cost control and cost reduction mechanisms? To me, I want to touch on this question because to me, Lean and Kaizen are very different than traditional cost cutting. A lot of cost cutting in organizations is focused on doing with less. The word lean even is troublesome because lean, so I've heard people say, oh yeah, we're already lean. We don't have enough resources as it is. And that's not what lean as in Toyota is about. Cost cutting in healthcare has traditionally meant reducing labor, and if people are already stretched too thin, that can hurt quality, it hurts morale, it can hurt patient safety. And so I think we've seen in healthcare, and I think it's the right playbook in other settings, if you ask the employees what are their ideas for improvement, not just around cost reduction, but making their work easier, providing better service, committing to employees and not laying them off in the name of cost reduction can lead to better cost reduction without hurting quality. You often find lots of employee ideas for increasing revenue, which is, I think, a better way of addressing underlying financial difficulties in an organization. So I think my nutshell answer would be, instead of laying off employees, ask employees and work together with them as a team. What do you think, Greg?
So I can't just say fire a bunch of people?
You said that we were talking about C. Montgomery Burns and The Simpsons, and one of these previous Ask Us Anythings. No, not.
All right. Well, if it's not firing a bunch
it.
of people, Mark,
No, don't fire.
what I think is so interesting, there's a couple points I want to make on this question. What I think is so interesting is in time and time again, organizations that employ a lean management system, right, that have really good continuous improvement cultures, find that lean is a lot about taking waste out of a system. They end up finding that in the process of doing this discipline, they not only increase the quality of whatever they're producing, but they also end up decreasing the cost. And if you think about that, that kind of starts getting at the fundamental question and definition of what value is. And so it's not necessarily intuitive, but what ends up occurring when you kind of take this systematic and disciplined approach is that those things come together. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is when to ask for cost savings ideas and when not to ask for them. We find over and over and over, if your lead kind of opening hand in introducing continuous improvement to frontline staff is give me cost-cutting ideas, that is not very inspiring, and it typically has a much higher chance of failing than if you lead with tell me what frustrates you at work and let's start solving those problems. You're going to get a much higher engagement with doing that. And so, Mark and I talk about kind of cost cutting in a very proactive way. Either if you want to do it at the beginning, typically needs to be done higher up in the management. That might be a middle management or a senior management kind of focus. Or it can be done several years down the road when there's a lot of examples and really that kind of culture has been built up in.
Greg, you cut out again.
But
no,
am I back?
You cut out again.
And am I back now?
Yep.
But I think most importantly, and I think the take home here is that we know that by simply saying, hey, what frustrates you, and not leading with you need to save a bunch of money with all your ideas, we actually find a very high percentage of very high impact ideas. We've studied everything in our system, and we know that approximately 1.5% of all ideas are worth more than $10,000, and about 0.5% of ideas are worth even more than $100,000. So I think that's a really good approach and really good kind of advice to learn from how other people have started their continuous improvement efforts. And it's great knowledge that you're going to start seeing ROI almost unintentionally right from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's counterintuitive. You often get more cost reduction by not focusing primarily on cost reduction. There's a great book, there's an article you can find online called Obliquity, based on the word oblique, John Kay, where he talks about the indirect path to goals and how powerful that is. And the leading organizations take that indirect approach. And yeah, Greg, you're right. I mean, I think in most settings, asking people for cost reduction is not going to engage them. I'm bringing it back to an earlier question, though. I wouldn't say never ask for cost reduction as an absolute, because in our book, Healthcare Kaizen, Joe and I shared the story of a hospital CEO in Indiana, not his health system, but a different health system, where they were already building this continuous improvement culture. They had already made a commitment to not lay people off. But I think there's a time for leaders to speak about reality. And the CEO said, look, we need to reduce our cost by $7 million this year or something like that. We're going to all pull together. We're all going to work on this. We're going to also improve quality. And he promised to shave his head, Greg. So this comes back to you and shaving your head. They hit that goal. He shaved his head. And, I think those are unique circumstances where they already had a lot of trust. They had a good culture to build upon. And maybe there just always needs to be a head shaving promise involved.
And maybe my audio failed during that part, but that was exactly what I was saying, that once you have that culture, I think you can kind of lean and push people in different directions that would probably not give you the intended outcome at the beginning if you did it that early on. So
yeah. So that brings us to a half hour here. We have some things to troubleshoot and try to figure out why we had some audio glitches, why the video wasn't working. That hasn't been a problem before, so we will do our best troubleshooting and make sure we have we're kind of back to the usual format next time. April 4th, same time slot, 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday. We're going to do the next Ask Us Anything. If you really do want to watch video of us, and I think Greg was right with his hypothesis that maybe people don't, you can go to our YouTube channel and find our previous Ask Us Anythings. For the last 3 episodes, we've started kind of chopping up individual questions, so you can search the YouTube channel, and if there's a particular question and answer of a couple of minutes long you want to share, it's easier to do so. So thank you for being a part of this today, or for watching, listening to the recording. On behalf of the KaiNexus team, again, I'm Mark Graban. Thank you for joining us today. Greg, do you have any final thoughts?
Please subscribe to our podcast. Take a look at our blog. We're putting a lot of energy into the continuous improvement community, and we'd love for you guys to be a part of it. So also make sure to give us a good rating so people will find all of our stuff a little bit better. And I also just want to say that this is a journey. There is no kind of starting and stopping point in doing continuous improvement. It's hard, and making sure you continue to be disciplined. So I'm going to kind of end this with saying thank you, and keep continually improving your lives and your organizations.
As we try to do here with ours. And sometimes things go wrong, and you fight through it, and we'll do some root cause analysis, and maybe I'll end up writing a blog post about it. So please come visit the blog and everything that we offer at KaiNexus.com. Thanks for tuning in today, and we'll see you next time.